The cameras never stopped flashing. Crystal chandeliers poured golden light across the grand ballroom, while the wealthiest families, Hollywood legends, politicians, and international journalists filled every corner of the historic charity gala. Every conversation echoed with elegance. Every smile looked rehearsed. Every photographer waited for the same moment, the arrival of the world's brightest stars. No one imagined they were about to witness a moment that would be remembered long after every trophy, every speech, and every glamorous photograph had been forgotten. Because that night, two people were about to recognize each other, even though, according to history, they never should have. The orchestra softened into a gentle melody as the enormous entrance doors slowly opened. Every camera instantly turned. A wave of whispers rolled through the ballroom. "She's here." Marilyn Monroe stepped inside. She wore an ivory evening gown that shimmered beneath the crystal lights like flowing moonlight. A white satin shawl rested gently over her shoulders, while a pair of pearl earrings reflected every flash from the waiting photographers. Her famous smile appeared exactly as the newspapers expected. Perfect, confident, untouchable. But tonight, it wasn't real. Hidden behind that smile was a pair of exhausted eyes carrying a secret she had protected for almost her entire life. She wasn't looking for celebrities. She wasn't looking for applause. She wasn't even looking at the cameras. She was searching for one face. Just one. Slowly she walked through the ballroom as reporters shouted questions from every direction. "Marilyn, look this way. One picture. Smile!" She never turned, not once. Every elegant step brought her closer toward the center of the ballroom until she suddenly stopped, completely. Her breathing froze. Across the room, standing quietly beside one of the marble pillars near the entrance, was Elvis Presley. Unlike everyone else, Elvis wasn't surrounded by reporters. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't posing. He simply stood there in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo with a crisp white shirt and narrow black bow tie, his famous dark hair carefully styled beneath the ballroom lights. His expression was calm, almost unreadable. Yet something inside him shifted the exact second he looked up. Their eyes met. The ballroom disappeared. The music faded. The applause dissolved into silence. It felt as though time itself had forgotten how to move. Neither of them smiled. Neither of them spoke. Yet something passed between them that no one else in the room could understand. The photographers sensed it immediately. Flash after flash exploded across the ballroom. Everyone expected another glamorous Hollywood greeting, another publicity photograph, another headline for tomorrow's newspapers. Instead, neither of them moved. Several endless seconds slipped by. An elderly violinist lowered his instrument without realizing it. Even the orchestra seemed uncertain whether to continue. Guests slowly began turning toward the strange silence spreading across the ballroom. What are they doing? Do they know each other? I've never seen either of them look like that. The whispers multiplied. Elvis finally took one slow breath. His heartbeat pounded so loudly that he barely heard the orchestra beginning again. It couldn't be. It simply couldn't. For years, he had dreamed about a face he couldn't remember. Fragments of childhood. A little girl laughing beneath summer sunlight. A dusty country road. Tiny hands holding his. Then, nothing. Only emptiness. Doctors had once blamed childhood trauma, Friends called them meaningless dreams. His family believed he had imagined them. Eventually, even Elvis himself stopped believing those memories had ever existed. Until tonight. Because the woman standing across the ballroom carried the exact same sadness he had seen inside those forgotten dreams. Marilyn slowly began walking toward him. Every step felt heavier than the last. Around her, conversations resumed, unaware that history itself seemed to be holding its breath. Elvis remained perfectly still. As she came closer, he noticed something unusual. She carried a tiny white handbag. Elegant, simple, nothing extraordinary. Until he saw the silver clasp. His face instantly lost all color. His fingers curled tightly at his side. No, that wasn't possible. The design, the tiny engraved rose, the worn leather near one corner, he knew that bag. Not because he had seen it before, but because he had seen it thousands of times. In dreams. The same impossible dreams that had haunted him since childhood. Dreams where someone kept whispering, "Don't lose it." Then darkness. Always darkness. Marilyn stopped only a few feet away. Neither of them noticed the dozens of cameras surrounding them now. The reporters shouted louder. "Shake hands! Look over here! Smile!" Neither obeyed. Marilyn's lips trembled. For a long moment she couldn't force herself to speak. When she finally did, her voice was barely louder than a whisper. "I found you." Elvis stared at her. Confusion battled recognition inside his eyes. She swallowed painfully before continuing. "I only wish." She paused, fighting tears already beginning to form. "I hadn't been so late." Those words struck Elvis harder than any applause ever had. Late? Late for what? Before he could ask, Marilyn carefully lifted the small white handbag. The silver clasp reflected the ballroom lights. Elvis instinctively reached toward it. His hand stopped halfway. His entire body shook. "Where?" he whispered. His voice cracked. "Did you get that?" Marilyn looked around. Hundreds of eyes watched them. Journalists were pushing closer every second. She leaned nearer until only Elvis could hear her. "If I answer here," her voice broke completely, "everything changes." Elvis felt the air leave his lungs. Nothing about this night made sense. Yet every instinct inside him screamed that she was telling the truth. Somewhere deep inside, a forgotten part of his past had just awakened. Another wave of camera flashes exploded around them. The ballroom erupted into applause, believing the stars had finally begun posing together. Nobody realized. Neither celebrity was performing anymore. They were remembering. Even if they didn't yet understand what they were remembering. Marilyn glanced toward a quiet corridor leading away from the ballroom. An old marble hallway disappeared into the shadows beyond the celebration. "There isn't much time," she whispered. "They'll never let us leave if we wait any longer." Elvis hesitated. Every logical thought told him to remain exactly where he was. His manager expected him. The charity organizers were waiting for a speech. The press had traveled across the country for photographs. Walking away now would create chaos. But something far older than logic pulled at him. A feeling, a memory without words, without another sentence. He nodded. Marilyn turned. Together they quietly stepped away from the flashing cameras. One photographer noticed first. "Wait! They're leaving!" Within seconds, dozens of reporters began following them across the ballroom floor. Neither Elvis nor Marilyn looked back. Because beyond the grand hall, past the marble staircase, hidden behind an old wooden door leading toward the forgotten balconies of the mansion, waited a secret that had survived for decades. A secret powerful enough to rewrite both of their lives forever. And neither of them knew that someone else had already seen the white handbag. Someone who had spent years making sure its contents would never be opened again. The heavy wooden door closed behind them with a quiet thud, shutting out the roaring applause of the ballroom. In an instant, the glamorous celebration disappeared behind thick stone walls, replaced by an almost haunting silence. Only the distant sound of the orchestra drifted through the old mansion like a fading memory. The balcony had clearly been forgotten for decades. Moonlight spilled across the cracked marble floor, illuminating weathered stone railings wrapped in climbing ivy. A cool breeze carried the scent of blooming roses from the gardens below, gently lifting Marilyn's blonde curls and the edges of her elegant ivory gown. The night felt strangely frozen, as if time itself had paused to watch what was about to happen. Elvis stood only a few steps away. For the first time in years, the king of rock and roll didn't know what to say. His heartbeat echoed louder than the music inside the ballroom. He looked into Marilyn's eyes again. They weren't the eyes of a glamorous Hollywood icon. They were the eyes of someone who had carried an unbearable secret for far too long. Finally, Elvis broke the silence. "What is this?" His voice came out softer than he expected. "You looked at me like you've known me your entire life." Marilyn lowered her head. A tear escaped before she could stop it. "I have." The words barely left her lips. Elvis frowned. "No." She slowly looked back at him. "You just don't remember." Those 6 words sent a chill through his entire body. Every instinct inside him wanted to deny them. But another part of him, the part buried beneath years of forgotten memories, was beginning to believe her. Marilyn carefully lifted the tiny white handbag onto the old stone table standing near the balcony wall. Its silver clasp reflected the moonlight. Elvis couldn't stop staring at it. His breathing became heavier. His hands felt strangely numb. "I've seen that bag before," he whispered. "I don't know where, but I've seen it." Marilyn closed her eyes. "I know." She slowly opened the clasp. Inside rested only 3 objects: a faded black-and-white photograph, an old envelope tied with a pale blue ribbon, and a tiny silver compass no larger than a pocket watch. The moment Elvis saw the compass, a sharp pain shot through his head. He staggered backward. Images exploded across his mind. A dusty country road, children laughing beneath bright summer sunlight, a wooden bridge crossing a narrow creek, a little girl with golden curls, the same silver compass hanging from her neck, someone shouting, running footsteps, rain, darkness, then nothing. Elvis grabbed the balcony railing to steady himself. What's happening to me? Marilyn quickly stepped forward, fear filling her face. Your memories. They're coming back. Elvis looked at her in disbelief. My memories? She nodded. The ones they made you forget. A cold silence settled between them. Elvis searched her face. hoping she would smile and admit this was some elaborate misunderstanding. She never did. Instead, she picked up the old photograph with trembling fingers. "Look closely." Elvis accepted it carefully. The photograph had faded with time, its edges worn and cracked. At first, it seemed ordinary. Two children stood beneath an enormous oak tree, a young boy, a little girl. Their small hands were tightly locked together. The girl smiled brightly toward the camera. The boy looked serious, almost protective. Behind them stood a modest farmhouse surrounded by wildflowers. Elvis felt his heartbeat stop. The boy had his face. Not exactly. Younger, smaller, but unmistakably him. He stared at the picture without blinking. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible." Marilyn's voice trembled. "It isn't." His fingers began shaking. "I've never seen this photograph before." "You did. When you were a child. I kept it." "You lost the memory." Elvis looked back at the little girl in the photograph. Something about her smile, something about the way she held his hand, pulled painfully at the deepest corner of his heart. Slowly, almost afraid of the answer, he looked up at Marilyn. "Is that?" She nodded before he could finish. "Me." The world seemed to disappear. The wind, the orchestra, the distant laughter, everything. Only silence remained. Elvis's eyes filled with confusion. "I don't understand." "You've never spoken about this." "Neither have I," Marilyn answered quietly. "Because I promised." "You promised who?" For several long seconds she couldn't answer. Her breathing became uneven. Finally, she untied the pale blue ribbon around the old envelope. Its paper had turned yellow with age. The handwriting on the front was still perfectly visible, to be opened only if they ever find each other again. Elvis stared at the words. His chest tightened. His own name appeared beneath the sentence. So did Marilyn's. Side by side, written in the same elegant handwriting. His hands began trembling uncontrollably. Who wrote this? Marilyn swallowed hard. The woman who saved both of us. Elvis slowly looked back at her. What do you mean, saved us? Marilyn's eyes filled with tears. Before either of us became famous, she paused. There was a terrible fire. Elvis felt another violent flash strike his mind. Orange flames, smoke filling the night sky, someone screaming, tiny hands slipping away, a woman shouting, "Run!" He grabbed his head as another forgotten memory forced its way back. I remember, he whispered. I remember the fire. Marilyn's tears finally fell. I prayed that one day you would. Neither of them noticed the shadow standing behind the half-open balcony door. A man dressed in a black tuxedo had been listening to every word. His expression changed the moment he saw the old envelope. Without making a sound, he quietly disappeared back into the mansion. A few seconds later, voices echoed through the hallway. There they are! The photographers found them! Hurry! Flashlights began flooding the corridor. The reporters were coming. Marilyn looked at Elvis with fear in her eyes.
"We're out of time."
Elvis looked down at the unopened letter. Whatever was written inside had waited decades to be read. And somehow, he knew that once he broke the seal, neither of their lives would ever be the same again. The voices grew louder with every passing second. "They're on the balcony! This way! Don't let them leave!" Camera flashes began spilling through the cracks around the old wooden door, painting brief bursts of white light across the ancient stone walls. Marilyn looked at Elvis with frightened eyes. "We have only one choice." Elvis lowered his gaze to the weathered envelope resting in his hands. For decades, it had remained sealed, waiting. Waiting for two people who no longer remembered why they had once meant everything to each other. His fingers trembled as he slowly broke the fragile seal. The old paper crackled softly beneath his hands. A single folded letter slid into his palm. The handwriting was elegant, but faded by time. Elvis unfolded it carefully. For a long moment, neither of them dared to read. Finally, Elvis took a slow breath and began. "If this letter has finally been opened, then a miracle has happened." His voice echoed across the silent balcony. "It means the two children I once promised to protect have found each other again." Marilyn covered her mouth. Fresh tears streamed down her cheeks. Elvis continued reading. "You were both too young to understand the tragedy that changed your lives. On the night of the fire, your families were gathered at the same farmhouse for a charity celebration in the countryside. When the fire spread, panic separated everyone. You refused to let go of each other's hands. Even while the building collapsed around you, neither of you would leave without the other." Elvis suddenly saw it. Not as fragments, not as dreams, as memories. A little girl crying, smoke everywhere. A frightened little boy refusing to run. "I won't leave you." Tiny hands locked together. Then, a woman lifting both children into her arms, running through flames. The silver compass swinging around the little girl's neck. The memory hit him with overwhelming force. His knees nearly gave way. Marilyn caught his arm before he fell. "You remember," she whispered. Elvis couldn't answer. He remembered everything. The farmhouse, the oak tree, the creek behind the fields, the games they played every summer, the promises two innocent children made without understanding life would soon separate them forever. He remembered calling her by a childhood nickname no one else had ever known. "Sonny." Marilyn gasped. Her tears became uncontrollable. "You remembered." Elvis smiled through tears of his own. "I thought you were only a dream." Marilyn gently shook her head. "I wanted to find you." "I searched for years." "But after we were separated, they changed our names. Our families moved. The newspapers only knew Marilyn Monroe. The world only knew Elvis Presley. No one remembered the frightened children we used to be." Elvis looked back at the letter. There was still more. "If you are reading this, there is one final truth you deserve to know. Neither of you survived that night alone. The little girl refused to leave the farmhouse until the boy was rescued. The little boy returned into the fire to save the girl's silver compass because she believed it belonged to her late father. Each of you believed the other had saved your life. The truth is," Elvis's voice broke, "you saved each other." Silence filled the balcony. Neither fame nor fortune, nor history could compare to those simple words. For years, the world had celebrated them as icons. But before any records were sold, before any movie premieres, before any screaming fans, they had simply been two frightened children refusing to abandon one another. A loud knock shattered the moment. The balcony door swung open. Photographers poured inside. Reporters surrounded them from every direction. "Elvis! Marilyn! Smile! What are you hiding? What happened out here?" Dozens of cameras pointed toward them. No one understood why both of the world's biggest stars were crying. Elvis looked at Marilyn. She gave a small, trembling nod. No more hiding. Together, they walked back into the magnificent ballroom. The orchestra slowly stopped playing. Hundreds of guests turned toward them. The room fell silent. Every camera waited. Everyone expected another glamorous photograph. Instead, Elvis stepped to the center of the ballroom. He unfolded the old letter once more. "My friends," his voice echoed through the grand hall. "Tonight, I came here believing I was attending a charity gala." He looked toward Marilyn. "But tonight, I found something far more valuable than fame." He smiled gently. "I found a piece of my life that I thought had been lost forever." The audience remained perfectly still. Not a single flash interrupted him now. Elvis reached for Marilyn's hand. She held it tightly. "We spend our lives chasing success. We chase applause. We chase recognition. But sometimes, the greatest treasure isn't waiting in front of us. It's waiting in a memory we were never meant to forget." Many guests quietly wiped away tears. Even the photographers slowly lowered their cameras. For the first time that evening, no one wanted a picture. They simply wanted to listen. Marilyn stepped forward. "There are moments in life that history never records. No headlines, no interviews, no awards. But those moments become the reason we survive." She looked at Elvis. "We lost decades. But tonight, we found each other again." The ballroom erupted into applause. Not the loud applause given to celebrities, not the applause reserved for performers. This applause was different. It came from hearts that had just witnessed something deeply human. Years later, newspapers would publish countless stories about that unforgettable gala. Some called it the greatest Hollywood mystery ever revealed. Others insisted it was merely a beautiful legend. No one could prove every detail. No one could explain why the old photograph, the compass, and the letter had remained hidden for so many years. But everyone who attended remembered one thing with absolute certainty. On a glamorous evening meant to celebrate wealth and fame, the brightest moment had nothing to do with celebrity. It belonged to two souls who had unknowingly carried the same forgotten childhood across an entire lifetime, until destiny finally brought them back together beneath the same light. And for the first time in many years, neither Elvis Presley nor Marilyn Monroe felt like legends. They simply felt like the two children who had finally found their way home.